desgosto, é pouco sozinho. É estrepe, é prego, é uma ponta, é ponto. É pingo pingando, é uma conta, é conto. É peixe, é gesto, é prata brilhando. É a luz da manhã, é o tijolo chegando. É a lenha, é o dia, é o fim da picada. É a garrafa de cana, o estilhaço na estrada. É o projeto da casa, é o corpo na cama. É o carro enguiçado, é a lama, é a lama. É poço, é bucho, é sapo, é rã. É resto de mato na luz.
Welcome, everybody.
São as águas de março.
So good to see faces of friends and maybe strangers, soon to be friends, as we convene on this Friday morning, maybe afternoon for a few folks if we're joining from other parts of the world. I have a few more still joining here as we get rolling today. So all right. Well, welcome from Maya and I, your hosts today, as we convene a little experiment, if you will, in some storytelling to find a way to continue to keep this community, this growing community together in special ways. Our intent is to do this monthly and bring in folks who want to tell their stories of what they're experiencing, how they're convening, what they're learning, and as we move some things forward here. So as we get into this particular part of the process, fully come in to listen, hear other perspectives. It does not go unnoticed or unmentioned with the horrible things that are going on in the Ukraine right now. So continued thoughts and prayers seem empty at some point, but just to really think about the travesty and the horrible things that are rolling over there. And as Martin and Maya talked a little bit before we joined here, it's what more reason to look for ways to convene, hit isolation, and really move toward belonging that we all, as we bring humanity to what's going on. So it's definitely in the back, I know, of my mind, and sadness today. So with that, it is good to convene with friends and to support each other as we work through here. So as we think about what's going on, we're going to move into our to connection before content, which is always part of what we want to do, that we connect with each other. And then we will move into some content. Very anxious and excited to hear Martin's story. So before we do that, let me turn it over to Maya, my partner, to kind of set us up for our first brief breakout to connect with each other.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. So our first breakout room is connection before content, and the question that you guys will be sharing and deeply listening to with each other is, why did you choose to be here today? So we will be in breakout rooms of 3 to 4 people, as always. So listen, enjoy, and share how you're showing up today and why you chose to be here. So you should be receiving an invitation here. If you have any questions, I'll stay behind a little bit so I can put you into a breakout room. All right.
Did you put me in a room, Maya? I don't see me in a room.
It's not actually letting me put you in a room. I think it's because you're the host.
Okay, I'll wait a minute. I'll just go join one here in a minute. One that's
okay. Yeah, you might be able to join the one that you would like to. Hi, Marn. I'll throw you into a breakout room.
Hi.
Hey, friend.
Hi, Jeff.
All right. So Joe or Jeff, should I hop in to room 4?
Why don't I'll hang here for a bit. Why don't you go hop? Because it'll let you. I'll just see where. Looks like you'll be in a group of 4, maybe. Then you want to join room 4? It looks like maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I'll hang here just because if you're not letting me go into that, I don't want to have people jumping in here that can't get in. So.
Okay. All right. I'll hop in. And if you just want to, I can broadcast a message when there's a minute left.
Did we give them 5?
Yeah, I think we can give them till 12:40.
Got it. Okay.
Cool. See you soon.
Hi, Fatima. Can you hear me, Fatima? I see your screen on. I can't hear you if you can hear me. Hi, Fatima.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you? Good to see you. I hear you. I can't see you yet, but I hear you. So
Let me just figure out which device I'm signing out on.
can you hear me okay?
Similar reasons and having common ground, which is very cool.
I'll go next. Good morning, everyone. Lee Rush from Pennsylvania. One of the people in my small group used the adjective that this work is intoxicating. I was thinking, well, it's Friday, so thank God it's Friday, because now I don't need to go to a bar to drink alcohol. I just go to a small group and get intoxicated. So far, so good. Thank you for that little word. Thank you. You know who you are. Thank you.
Everyone, it's JP, and I really appreciate how the folks in my conversation had mutual benefits, both personal and they extended to each of us as a group. So we're all a part of the Mutual Admiration Society this morning.
I'm loving this.
And a bit along those lines, this is Claudia. Good morning. And yes, it's synchronicities and the power of being, being connected, even if we're not physically in the same space. And we're here, and wonderful connections in the group.
Wonderful. All right, Jeff, I'm going to pass it back to you
Yeah,
to introduce our great
absolutely.
storyteller.
Thank you. Absolutely. So yeah, it just continues to be amazing and intoxicating the way we can connect quickly with strangers, even via Zoom. So thank you for that. So yeah, I'm very excited to formally introduce you to Martin Itzkow. I've had the pleasure of doing some work with Martin over the last year or so. He's invited me into his space to learn and to hear what some of the great work he's doing. I love the way he describes himself as a human valued center, interpersonal neurobiological coach and consultant. All I know, he's a great human being, and really excited to hear a little bit about what his experience has been, that you can relate to all of us in this work. So as a way, welcome Martin as we get going. I think as we have started this, I just kind of started with kind of a general question for you, Martin, and let you you can riff on that as we go forward. So in this kind of professional and personal journey you've been on, you've worked at so many levels, from a very micro local level to the very macro global level in these elements of the journey. Just tell us what some of the commonalities and themes, and what have you been learning as you've experienced. I know you've talked about these 4 kind of journeys that you've been on, and just let that be a start for you, Martin, to share with us today.
Well, thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure being here, and I know we don't have a lot of time. I think I want to start from the place of actually looking at how I frame my experiences in the work that I've been doing, and some of the things that I will speak to as we go forward, which relates specifically to Peter's work and the work we've been doing together. I'm going to actually reference the concentric circle of care by using the golden circle. Does everybody know what the golden circle is? 3 concentric circles. The outside circle is how. The second on the end is the what, and the middle is the why. And I look at my experience over 4 different journeys of starting from the outer and working to the inner. And I know from my experience in working many different places, and I'm going to speak very quickly about the 4 journeys with Maya's help as well, is that I started and spent a lot of time on the how. And I think about that in the context of the work we've been doing with Peter's work. And it's very much about, did I start at the problem? And I started initially at the problem. And that's where it came from. So from a neurobiological point of view, negativity begets negativity. And I see that as a key learning of our work, where it actually is very much focused on possibilities and the future of possibilities as a driver to pull people to the future, not push people to the future, which I think has been our experience. So I know that in terms of what we've talked about and what I'm here to speak about, it's very much in that frame. And in a sense, my 4 journeys, which I'll speak to very, very quickly with Maya's help, it started with the first journey. The 1980s was actually the how. It was about the how. How am I going to fix this? How am I going to go from negativity to positivity? How am I going to look at it in terms of engaging people? And that was the era you engaged everybody. You just put everybody into a room. And the large number did not signify to me that there was any learning or any engagement, but we had the voices in the room and possibly not really doing much, but we felt good that we had the right numbers and perhaps the right mix. The second journey, which was basically the 1990s, yes, I am old, was the what era. What is it we have to do? And it actually moved into the third journey, which was the year 2000. It was still the what. My 4th journey was 2010. It's now the why. It's the core values. It's the reason we exist. It's the intersection, and this I think is really important. It's now the intersection of brain, mind, body, and soul. And those 4 need to come together in everything we do. And I know the work that we've all been involved in, we understand that context, but we also know that other people do not. And the intersection is really important. So in things that I think have been helpful in moving forward is the small group. The small group engagement is the most powerful engagement, I find. And that I think I've learned that. The future is always going to be through possibilities. and you'll hear that all the way through this process. We're not looking at this moment about many, many questions, but the point is the power of a single question to do its job is really important. And I've learned that in terms of coaching. If you can ask the most powerful question in 7 words and it could do the job, go invisible. Be quiet. And I think that's part of our work here. But ultimately, what I've learned through the understanding of gifts to and from is the importance of a stranger. And how do we work with strangers, and how do we put that up front? That our work is actually working with strangers who do not know each other, maybe may have never known each other. And our job, in a sense, is to convene and to engage and bring strangers together. And I think that's the most powerful part of my work as we move forward. So hopefully, Jeff, that helps set the context and some of the things that I've been learning. There's more, because I want to talk about inversion of cause and effect. I think that's really important too.
I think, Martin, why don't you let's lean into that cause and effect piece. I think, Martin, that would be a good piece to kind of move into. And then I think I'll have a couple more specific things that have struck her through our conversations. So let's lean into that a little bit. What was the inversion piece for you?
Okay, maybe I'll very quickly describe 4 journeys, and I'll explain how that fits within that. Going back to the 80s, very much involved in community work, very much involved in leaders and nonprofit organizations throughout my province of Manitoba in Canada. And I came from a beginner's mind, and it wasn't necessarily intentional, but I started to realize I didn't know. And as I moved through my 4 journeys, I started to realize that my beginner's mind wouldn't stop there, but would carry on. And that clearly is a really important and learning for me is be open, be willing to have a beginner's mind and actually enjoy that, but test it constantly. The other part that helped me frame the inversion, and I'll get to the inversion part, was very much about the focus of how much was I inside my mind? How much did my mind matter more than anybody else's? How much did other people's voices actually register with me? And I think I was so focused on my mind as being the central core of thinking. And that was in the 80s. So that's where I was coming from. But let me talk about the inversion. In 1980s, there wasn't an inversion. It was basically, to whom do I serve? And it was for. It was for people. It was for others. And the inversion would actually take place in my 4th journey, when I started to realize it was, to whom do I serve? It's actually with, not for. And that's a hard piece of learning, because I hear that all the time, in that when you ask people why they come to the table and what are they there to accomplish, it's always for others. It's always believing that their mind, their neural pathways, their thinking is the best and the smartest. And I realized going for those 4 journeys, that the realities in the 4th journey, I realized, invert it, ensure that it's with. And having a conversation about with changes the dynamic completely, and we all have examples of that. But back to the first journey, I was all about fixing. It was about fixing everything, fixing problems, fixing people, because of course I knew more. My brain was the center of attention. And how often do we hear about leaders who believe they are the center of attention? They are the ones who have the only brain, who can think through an issue and so on. And most importantly, in the 80s, it was about a present focus. It was now. It wasn't about 20 years from the future. It was about today. It was really, in a sense, the focus was what could I solve today and not worry about its implications and its ripples to the future. It was not a concern. So I moved from the first journey to the second journey, and that's when I worked in government. And you probably have heard all this about people who worked in government in large institutions. And I was a director of a unit that did public policy around immigration settlement. So I was very much involved in the context of looking at my province, looking at Canada, and saying to myself, I'm going to influence the future of who comes here and who lives here, from wherever they come from around the world. And it was still the inside mind, and it was still fixing a problem. The problem was we needed more people, we needed different skill sets, but there was a problem we had. It wasn't about the possibilities of these people coming from various cultures, changing the way we thought about our own community and changing the way we understood what community was about and the value of different perspectives. That wasn't where my mind was at. It was still on the inside. And from a policy point of view and government and institution, and you see this all the time now, it's so much about what makes sense within and not necessarily without. And not necessarily understanding that the outside voices are more important than the inside voices. It's again the question of, to whom do we serve? I wasn't serving at that point. I was doing for. And that was a challenge. The focus was also somewhat different from the first journey, where it was the present. Now I had to actually understand what the future could be and starting to step out into the future. And then that was giving me the frame of what are the possibilities. So I went from fixing to seeking possibilities, but still thinking within my own mind and engaging others as we went through it. But it was ultimately, how did I decide to make the decision? And it was all based on my assumptions, my goals, my values, and realizing to some extent now, in being retrospective, how selfish of me. How quite selfish of me and self-absorbed. And I see that still in terms of many of the systems and institutions we have, so self-absorbed about their minds matter the most. And I'll get back to the minds in the future. So we moved into the second journey, and there's much more about the fact that now it was a mixture of fixing and seeking possibilities and understanding what the differences could be. I moved into my third journey. That's the year 2000 and plus. It was all about perspective taking. It was always going to be about perspective taking. That's when I became very much in terms of community engagement, focusing attention on what is the community. I was still focusing on what is a community without thinking it was really about belonging. And belonging to what? And whether we define the community geographically in terms of common interest, it was always to me, and again retrospectively, very much about what does this belonging mean? Why do people want to belong? What is so important about belonging? What is the essence of belonging? And I'm still into what, still trying to solve the what question, and still looking from the inside, but finally I was starting to look from the inside and out at the same time, and seeking the out. Seeking to hear the other voices. And of course, as a consultant doing community engagement, doing it for multiple reasons everywhere in North America, and doing a lot of work in community development, and also focusing on being a coach and spending a lot of time and energy being trained in that area, plus focusing on a lot of values and being trained on values and so on. It was always now focusing on what's the balance between inside and outside. How do I live now? The interesting thing, and I'll talk about in the fourth journey, there's the inside, there's the outside, and there's the between. So it wasn't just learning one or two dynamics, it's the third one. And the third one, again, retrospectively, and as I was writing this and thinking about this, it was the between that really mattered the most. And I think that's where I've learned the most in that journey. And that's when the service to others began with the service with. And actually understanding that the change would be that the other voices would become more important for me to understand exactly what I needed to do. So it was that inversion where I thought it was clearly about to, and now was with. And to whom do we serve? So I'll give you an example that I thought was really interesting. It came out of last night. I had an engagement because I'm working in an organization called the Coalition of Cultural Communities. And it's interesting, we brought cultural communities and child welfare to the table for the first time in 12 years. And it's taken 12 years to get both to the table. And it was very much perspective taking. And it became really clear in the conversation that was taking place, and very much it was about possibilities. It was very much about the focus of being able to ask a single question and move people to answer it multiple ways and still receive value. What became very interesting in terms of perspectives, communities would say, you are there to serve us. System said, on the contrary, we serve you, but we serve it from our perspective, but we want you to tell us how you are going to help us serve you. But it's going to go through our perspective. In other words, community serve the system, and the system matters the most. So trying to change that dynamic over time will be both an inside, an outside question, and a between question and process. It also means that we're now talking about breaking through boundaries. And I didn't mention the fact that time is really an important dynamic in this conversation. The first journey, it was the present moment. It was always the present. The second journey was much broader because it was government policy. The third journey of working in community engagement was even broader, but it was not my perspective. The scope changed. The scope changed. Did somebody say something? I'll carry on. So the scope changed, and it became one of 30, 40 years and the lives of people that I was working with in terms of community engagement and coaching. It was about their lives and how they saw their time and how they perceived the dynamic of how their lives were moving forward. So it was very much the boundaries were established by others, not by me. And that was the third journey. I'm into the fourth journey now, and starting about 2010. And it's very much about thinking about the dialogue and the engagement as a tool of social change. And really understanding that the work that we do is very much based on how society needs to change. And we're working with each other to understand the perspectives of how we see what is society, what is community, what are the values we bring forward. And primarily within that journey, it is very much an expansive view of understanding that we don't have answers to everything. Number one. Number two, we are working with wicked problems. We understand things in very interesting ways. We define problems as simple, complicated, and complex. We get that wrong all the time. We often come up with a definition of a problem, and we have solutions to a problem, and they don't match each other. That's what we're facing now. We are in complex times. It requires an understanding that in this expansive mode, understanding it's not about today, it's about tomorrow as well. It's about inside out and in between. We are often asking the wrong questions, taking the wrong perspective in terms of understanding. Because it is so complex, we may not be able to solve the problem. We may be able to manage it. And I think we're in that situation with Ukraine and with Russia and what's happening. I am not so sure that that wicked problem can be solved that easily. We are now into a management problem and challenge, I think, going forward. But in the fourth journey, it's the expansive mind that I started to realize. So it was moving beyond possibilities to an expansive perspective of taking into account that we are working together, we are engaging together, we are working now through a different kind of a context where I think what's true for me and in terms of the fourth journey is very much about the fact that we're working through different neural pathways. We are working through the extended mind. It's not my mind, it's our minds. And how are our minds communicating with each other? And I always say that it's basically what's invisible below the horizon of the iceberg, what's under the hood in terms of leaders and communities as facilitators. We need to pay attention to the neural pathways we are constructing within ourselves and others. We are constructing neural networks and the way our neurobiology operates with each other. And often we influence others without even realizing how much we influence their neurobiology, their behaviors, their thinking. And the ultimate perspective that I think is fascinating in realizing more about neurobiology is that we are shaping the autonomic nervous system of the people we talk to. We are having that kind of an impact on people and systems by the conversations we have. What is also fascinating, and going back to some of the work that we've been talking about in terms of the gifts to and from, the way of understanding possibilities as opposed to fixing, the idea that we actually are working through questions which help people to actually construct different mental models. We are having an amazing impact on people, and it's a very powerful impact. And I think that from my perspective, and the way I see us moving forward in terms of engagements and working with people, we need to understand how we are impacting their brains, their bodies, their emotions, their perspectives. And I think that, to me, is the challenge of the work that we have actually started with. In the fourth journey, it's allowed me to move to the strangers conversation and to actually engage strangers. And I would probably say this started formally in my mind February 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. And it started in a way that I started to look at my network around the world. And because we were locked in place, we were frightened, we were lonely, we were isolated, we were feeling those things. The question is, how do we actually change that dynamic for ourselves? And I felt, for me, it was reaching out. And so I started speaking to colleagues I had around the world, 2 or 3, and we started to come together monthly. And it was all around the belief that it would emerge as it would need to emerge. There wasn't a plan. There weren't goals attached to it. We didn't have outcomes in mind. We just needed to be with each other. And it's lasted this long, to the point of where we actually are focusing on bringing more people to these kinds of conversations. Our focus is called the wisdom of hardship. And we've used that as the frame to bring people to a conversation, but it's very much about encouraging. And in some of the work that we've written, we've talked about our work is bringing strangers together, which means a lot of the work and a lot of the ideas that have come out of this program with you as colleagues are being applied. And as a matter of fact, Peter has been engaging us on that conversation. The other part that I think is really interesting is because we have really difficult conversations ahead of us. We have people who are disconnected and disaffected and disengaged. And I've done work with people who are disengaged. We're working with a person by the name of Martin Sandy out of Sweden, who does a lot of work with disengaged folks between community who feel disengaged and those who actually influence public policy and change. And the story that Martin has told us, and I've worked with Martin for years in these areas, he said that the Swedes were known as, I think, the most liberal democracy in the world. You may be shocked by this, but they're not anymore. The right wing they're moving to the right very quickly, whatever that means to us. They have quite a few murders. They have a lot of violence in the community. They have people who are completely disengaged and who actually are being perceived as dangerous to their society. That's not the Sweden that I knew. That's Sweden now. And so his work is bringing both parties together, those who make decisions for those lives, their public policy, their officials of government, who have absolutely no understanding of how to engage. They come to fix. And the problem, from their point of view, are these people. They're the problem. And the community, on the other hand, has felt that they've been pushed aside for many, many years, for many, many reasons. And this sounds familiar in Canada, in the United States, and every place around the world. We have populations that have been pushed aside. They are strangers that we need to bring into conversations to be heard. And I know the most important thing that I've learned through most of my work has been the fact that thinking happens beyond our single brain, and other brains become important. And listening is one of those important things. And the invitation to listen is the critical part. And I go back to Martin's point. His point is, and this is the work that I think we need to do, we currently sit around the fire. It's time to sit in the fire. Time to move into the fire. And the work that we do allows us to move into the fire, because we actually have a framework that allows us to listen, to learn, to experience, and to also understand that we are co-regulating and living with each other, but our extraneural input is from the other. It's not about us and our brain at this moment.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin, for walking us through those incredible 4 journeys of yours. And we do have some great questions in the chat. So thank you everyone who put them in there. But first, I wanted to ask a question because something really resonated with me last week when we were speaking. And I think it's very present with me even here today as I show up. So when we spoke earlier last week, you said, "We are all strangers in a strange world, but we can still feel good." And I thought that, it feels that with each passing day, our collective trauma is evolving. And I just want to know, like, how is it that this working with strangers and inviting people in, what hope does that give you for the future?
Tremendous hope. And the experience that I've had working through the wisdom of hardship, and we have some members from the wisdom of hardship here today as well, is that the belief is that there's good, that there are people who have goodwill. There are people who are actually living the world in the world the way you are and want the world to be different. They also are changing the way that I actually feel about myself. And I know others would probably say how they feel about themselves has changed because as strangers not knowing each other, we didn't have a lot to lose coming together. We could have easily turned off and gone away. But there was something about the fact that we saw this as a very important goal, to bring people to the table who would never even have access to the people who are now coming to the table, never understood other people's experiences, and actually has helped people move away from loneliness to some extent, fear, threat, and that's part of the conversation of strangers. It's a place of safety. It's a place of connection. It's a place of engagement. And to me, it's also a sense of a different kind of belonging in the world, because we live in our boxes, in our own places, in our spaces, in our own time. Bringing strangers to the table changes that dynamic. Does that help, Maya?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I also love that statement. I think it's a great quote. So, Jeff, how about we bring in one of the questions from the chat? And
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
It leans into this a little bit. I think, Martin, I think what spoke to me that you talked about the between the inside and outside is so critical. And a question that we had in the chat was, can you talk a little bit about in the transitions as you look back now on your 4 journeys or others, as you're making those transitions, what did you learn or what showed up about that space as it was transitioning quickly, organically, or anything that you'd like to share about those pieces, which really around the between space and what you've learned or what you like to tell us about those transitions between your phases?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm going to use, Bridges' model of transition, the 3 stages of transition. The middle stage is very much, in a sense, the place where we have to actually reflect and explore what the past is and where we want to be in the future. And that middle space is very much the same conversation about when I'm engaging other people, it's about me. It's about that other person, trying to understand that perspective, but realizing it's everything in between. That transition, that engagement between us is equally important because it provides with a different dynamic if I pay attention to it. So it's not taking my body and my perception of the person and going out and then going back to myself. It's basically, how do we come together? How do I start to understand? And from a coaching point of view, it's always about perceptual positions. And I keep on thinking, how can I take myself out of myself and be in that person's position? How do I step into their world? And that's empathy, but it's also compassion and starting to realize, how do I understand their suffering, their experience? How do I then move out of that? And by coming back to the in-between, it allows me to come back to center and to realize I'm both parties at the same time. It's just not about me anymore. It's about the other person. I'm now actually both and trying to understand both perspectives and integrate them. And then I go back into my perspective and then I understand their perspective. Mm. It's a way to shift the way you perceive the world and the relationship you have with the other person. It's perception and perspective taking I've realized over the course of my journeys is probably the most important tool that leaders, people who make change have. It's about helping them with their perspective taking. And we hardly ever talk about that. It's more important than the technical skills. It's more important than simply some of their engagement skills or convening skills. Their perspectives and the way we've allowed leaders, and we can look at that politically, I always want to know, how are they perceiving? And are they perceiving themselves separately from others? Are they seeing themselves between others? Do they see that they are the other?
Great, Martin. Love it. And then a little bit of a follow-up on that too, Martin, is this, for you personally, what helped you move through those transitions as you described it, as you kind of went from the how to the what and to the why? Anything particular as you reflect back on what specifically helped you in those transitions?
Well, it's interesting. If you asked me if I knew what my journeys would be at the very beginning, what the pathway would be, I would have said, you're dreaming. I had no idea. So, retrospectively thinking about that, and I could see that now for probably the journey post-government. That's when I consciously became aware. I think I was unconscious for probably 2 of the journeys. I was unconscious. I think I was truly terrible thing to say, but I think I was totally unconscious. I was not perceiving. I was probably not honest about what was happening because I was probably enamored by being able to be in positions and having the opportunity to make this change. But it was never about me. And I think when I came into government and then after government, I realized, so what have I really been doing here? And then I left government. The interesting part about government is I quit. And I have to tell you a quick story. I had many people coming to me and ask me if I was depressed, if I actually had a breakdown. Why would people leave government was the question. And I said I had to leave. It was enough. And I started to really realize that what I had actually experienced pre-government and the other journeys and leading to after government is that I needed to seek a different way of understanding where I needed to be in the world. And government was not it. And doing for people was not it. And realizing that thinking out loud and starting to understand that context, it was very much, what did I need to feel safe? What did I need to actually be able to take care of myself and others? What did I have to do to welcome others? What did I have to do to engage others, to understand it wasn't about me? It took a while for me to get out of me and not worry only about me. And that was the challenge of the transition. And that to me is still the transition, is continuing to basically say, it's not about me, it's about we. And that sounds trite, but it's more about how are we engaging and how are we living together and how am I impacting you neurobiologically, morally, spiritually, even through embodied wisdom. How do all those things now fit? And that's only been in the last 12 years that I've started putting those things together. And I'm very much into spiritual intelligence, which is very much compassion and wisdom. And working through that. But also now tying it back into the brain. And the brain is only a little box. It's the rest of the body and the connection to other people that makes us think and makes us human.
Yeah. It could be a whole other session on the spiritual piece where we're just talking about too, Martin. So thank you. So, and with that, just it sounds, you mentioned before and just now, as far as the brain, mind, body, and soul, where does the heart come into those domains? Is that part of, how do you bring the heart into those domains that you mentioned?
Through the brain, through the body, and through the soul. Because the heart, you probably know this, that the heart communicates more often with the brain than the brain communicates with the heart. So the brain is saying something, and it's called coherence. It's the brain, it's the body, it's the heart, is very much connected with each other. And that's one part, but it's also the body, the embodied awareness of where the heart and the breathing and the blood pressure and the beats per minute, heart rate variability controls our future. They're the markers of our health and our ability to continue to be alive. But ultimately, It's the spirit. It's the soul. It's the why. It's the why. And the why exists for all four of those elements, but they primarily exist under the spiritual intelligence, the compassion and the wisdom conversation as humans. And I question that when I meet with people and do engagement and coaching. How close can I get to a conversation that talks about spirit? And not from a religious point of view, not from a faith point of view, but clearly the why of the person, the existential question. And as a coach, there's a process I put in place, and the most difficult conversation I have with people, if they ever want to go there, is not about purpose, it's not about vision, it's not about calling, it's about destiny. And I have to tell you, most of the time in conversations with people, destiny, it can't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It stalls out, because I think part of their evolution is the one of actually looking much more inward and not being afraid to do that work.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful, Martin. So in the danger of going too much back to the how, I'm going to go here anyway. So I'm curious as we talk about the conversations that Peter has gifted us with. And I think it kind of talks about, for me, the between piece, specifically the invitation. I think this community in the past has, hey, it's great when I get folks in the room, but how do we encourage and how do we provide an invitation, conversation, and invite? And how has that played in your work? And what have you learned about how to invite others that might be on the fringe, afraid, not necessarily knowing how to enter?
Well, I think the invitation itself as a framework that really talks about why we're inviting somebody to participate in this process is also saying to them clearly, here's what we will participate in, here's what we offer you, what we need from you. We have to basically understand that you've actually bought into this. So here's what we need, here's what we expect from each other, but there's always a door open. There's always a place for dissent. And we will accept that, and with no problems at all, no concerns, that people have the right to come into our work and to leave. We have a model in place that in our invitation it says, come to consume or come to contribute. You could play either at different times in this process. And if you simply want to consume, we will cherish that. We will embrace that with you. So when we look at actually writing the invitation, and we've done this multiple times, we do talk about what's the hurdle, what is the context we're inviting you to. And our work is very much about social change. It's about specifically what needs to change, what we're trying to differentiate from the current to the future. And so that hurdle is the explanation and the hook for people to see that they have a role to play. Then we talk about obligations, expectations, but ultimately the most important one that I just indicated is the fact that please come to consume, participate, contribute, or simply, consume, or participate, contribute. Your choice. And there is that continuum. You can play anywhere along that. You could dissent in terms of looking inwards and saying simply, am I ready to actually provide the yes to this? Or am I going to say something about my no? The power of the no is something I've learned in the course that I thought was really important. And there's some really interesting work on that, not just simply in terms of Peter's model and the work, but in terms of deep democracy. There's a tremendous amount of work about the no voice, about no, and how to respect the no. And then how do you understand the perspective of the no? And so in the invitation, we are clear that we want to hear the no, even as we engage the person. I hope that helps.
That's great. A lot of nods, a lot more things. And I think some point, maybe after the session, Martin, if you have some examples of a written invitation you've used, people in the community would love to see some of those as we kind of share forward through that. Yeah, another question that was in the chat as well talks about you started with your circles of the how, the what, and the why. How and does the who intersect with the why? And is the who maybe a fourth element, or how does the who become alive for you, Martin, in this work?
Well, I think the who fits into each one of those concentric circles, but it's the context of why you want the who. So if you're doing the how, the things we need to do, the question is who needs to be at the table, who's missing. It's always a question of who's missing. And it's almost, it goes beyond the conversation of diversity. I have to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion into this, of course. It's not just the geography and the character of the person. It's very much about the role and the ability for the person to be treated equally, fairly, and being given opportunity to be able to meet their potentials within this. So the who fits for each of those areas, and it's always a question, who's missing? And why are they missing? And I see that in terms of my work all the time. When we're working with communities and engagement, there's always a question, and they often are upset with me. The question is, who's missing? And you're basically saying to them, who are the people that you think are dissenting, who would actually go to the no? And you never want to hear about the no, but the no is really important. If you have a yes without a no, the yes doesn't mean a thing. We've heard that. It's true.
Great. Maya?
All right. So at this point, Martin, not to put you on the spot, but what are the crossroads that you are facing in your work?
It's an interesting time for me because I've been working in two different dynamics. I'm working with faith leaders, which is an interesting challenge, and I'm working with health care leaders. And my decision moving forward is, do I want to work with these two groups anymore? Because they are so challenging and so damaged that I'm not sure I have the courage to carry on to do the work with them that it requires, because I think part of me has seen myself, especially in terms of, can I work with them in a way that I'm co-regulating with them? Because they are so dysfunctional and dysregulated. I'm going neurobiologically again. There's so much happening. I don't believe I'm the best equipped to deal with that in some ways. So the question is, do I want to play in those areas, or do I want to change the focus of my attention? And I'm thinking that I want to spend more of my time working with the disengaged in engagement processes with powerful people. I think that's the place. That's the why for me. And I've done this before, but I do think we need more of that now. And if I can encourage everybody around the table to consider, how do you work with people who are disengaged and bring them to conversations of people that have power over their lives, I think that would be a very powerful place for us to play together. Because it's not happening. It's not happening. We know that around the world it's not happening. So who's better equipped? And I've spoken to other networks. I think, Maya, you set me up for this one, but I've spoken to other networks and they don't get that piece of the conversation. And that's really bad. That's really sad. It's really terrible for democracies because we are still working with the majority versus the minority. And that hasn't changed. And it's worse now. And I spent 6 months, a couple of years ago, doing a project with a politician, bringing together all the people over a period of 5 months of people who came to his office all the time, who were disengaged. No one ever listened to them. So I brought them together, and people who were actually polarized on conversations, but they learned how to listen. And that was only step one. We were able to get to the next step, which was actually having conversations about what's the most important question they want to ask of each other.
Yeah. Oh, great, Martin. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing so much more, I know, in depth of the stories. So please reach out to each other as that goes. And the way I'd like to close out our session together would be just, we're not going to go into breakout groups. We're just going to kind of stay in the large group at this point, and just share, either unmute your microphone and share, or in the chat, what gifts have you received in this session that we've had today? Love to hear, something that struck you or whatever was happening through there. So please, what gifts have you received as we've interacted with each other today? Joe?
I want to thank Martin. Just his being with us is a gift, especially with his soothing voice and sense of peace that comes through your words, Martin. That was a fantastic gift. I got a gift to reflect on a lot of what you said, but in particular, the notion of come whether you want to consume or you want to participate and contribute. To me, and this is very intriguing, and it is inviting me to do a lot of reflection, especially that I have ran across a concept of passive activeness a few decades ago, which is sometimes I am making a difference simply by being here. And am I then consuming or contributing? So this is an invitation to reflect on that a little bit, along with many thoughts that came through your sharing this wonderful journey. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Joe. I see some gifts coming through in the chat. Please pay attention to those as well. Other gifts, folks, you've received today?
I'll go. I think that for me, the concept of spiritual intelligence, it's something that was really missing in my life, and I appreciate so much for that. I already am like researching and got some material on it. I think that it's very important, especially for me. I was never a very religious person, but this meaning of spirituality and this higher sense of empathy and taking care of others, it was always with me. So it kind of put some pieces of my puzzle together. So thank you for that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joy. All right. We'll continue to cherish the gifts. Martin, you are and still will always still be you're a gift to me personally in the work that you're doing and what I learned. So I look forward to more partnerships as we go on. So Maya, you want to kind of close us out with maybe some the specific next steps as we move forward, and we'll close out the formal gathering here. Absolutely. And yes, this was such a gift today, this space, and Martin getting to talk to you last week and then also today was a huge gift to me. I still have this beautiful, tangible thoughts all put on a piece of paper, which I love. And yeah, so I hope everyone enjoyed this very first session, our stories of growth and belonging, journeys of growth and belonging. And we will be having these sessions every month, the last Friday of the month, the fourth Friday of the month. So you will be seeing more invitations coming through to your inbox. If anyone is interested in participating as a storyteller, also please reach out to us. We know that you are all have these incredible journeys to share. So if you're feeling like sitting in Martin's seat next time, just let us know. And in the meantime, we will follow up an email from this session as well and share. We recorded the session today, so if you know anyone who would benefit from this, forward them the message. And yeah, we hope to see you in future gatherings. Thank you all. Martin put his email in the chat if you want to reach out directly to Martin. So stay connected, folks. In this times of hope, yet considerable sorrow around this world. You all are a gift to me, and it's just gives a sense of the hope as we come forward. So thanks for your sharing, for your consuming and contributing today, which we all did. And have a good, healthy, safe, blessed weekend. And until we meet again, take care. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thanks, Zaya. Hey, Brad.
See ya.
Take care, Lee. And Lee is brave enough to be a storyteller soon, so we'll be in contact with you, Lee. Great. Lee has great stories.
Have a
really
good weekend, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Lee. Take care, bud.
Yes.
Good to see you, my friend.
We'll see you in the fire. So
Thank
how
you,
was
Martin.
how was that
Beautiful. Oh, awesome. How did you feel?
in the fire?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, but it was good. It was
In
good,
a
but
good way? Yeah.
in a very, very good way. I mean, I've spent the last 4 days thinking about this very carefully and reading and preparing myself and all the things. And I wanted to make sure I was able to actually ensure that the lessons learned were integrated throughout all of my work. But it's the question asked about, well, you asked the question about the transitions. It's all retrospective. I mean, I didn't see any of this coming, you know?
Yeah. I said I would assume that because it's one of those things when you're living it, it feels like day to day doing your thing, right?
No, absolutely. But I didn't realize how much of an arrogant asshole I was. No, seriously, I'm thinking back to government. Boy, was I an ass. And I didn't realize I was very powerful. And from an immigration point of view, I made decisions about people who were medically inadmissible to Canada. Like, what an asshole I was. And, it's interesting because, do you have a few minutes? It was interesting because I used to see my parents, they're gone now, but I used to see them for coffee on a Sunday at McDonald's, and they had friends from different communities. And guess what? I met one of the people, they didn't know this, where I had to make a decision about their mother.
Wow.
And it was like, but it didn't actually make a difference to the decision. But it was interesting. Years later, I thought, unbelievable power to make a decision about someone's life. And I think what's interesting, even thinking about the idea of inversion, and looking at the inversion of cause and effect, I don't think we understand that and we use it, and I think it's such a powerful learning, and it is very confusing for people and systems to understand that. And the engagement, even when we engage people, we still do it for.
We do.
Right?
Yep.
It's all about for. It's never with. And even last night's conversation with 5 leaders from child welfare, 12 years to get them to the table, they still want to do what they do. And I think everybody wanted to be nice, and it was safe and it was comfortable, but we haven't got to the crisis conversation where the community says, don't do it for us.
That's right.
Right? They're not there. And the community is afraid to say, don't do this for us.
Right. Exactly. And I think there's actually a matrix that I heard from Cormac Russell with ABCD movement and things, and maybe you're familiar too, Martin. It's not just the for. There's the beginning piece. I'm going to do it to you.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's the to and the for, and
yes.
The transition that I continue to learn, as you talked about it, is with, and ultimately you want to go to by the community. So moving from the to and the for to the with and the by is huge. It's a simple thing to see, but that exists in our daily lives so much. And I even, as we prepare this conversation today, the three of us, we know what they want. We're going to do things for them. Well, yes. I mean, it is so present. And I think the other part that I'm learning too, Martin, is not to demonize that, because it does come from a good place for most folks. It comes from a place of wanting to be of service. But I think the quote from Peter that I use all the time in our sessions is we need to quit being helpful and start being useful.
Yep. And I think it's also the mind of stop thinking you're going to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And I think there's something beyond the why. I'm still trying to, the buy. I'm still trying to figure out what that is. It's almost like that model to me is still wrong, because we're always going to be alongside each other.
Mm-hmm.
The question, so it's almost like we're alongside each other. How do we actually bring our gifts to each other?
Right.
As opposed to doing it for or by and all the rest of it. It's more about how do we actually share the gifts, and how to do it in a way that actually it's perceived as something that's fair and reasonable to all of us, as opposed of, getting into conflict about.
It is. That's a good thing to think about. What is beyond, because I think unfortunately there are times where the communities, activists, and things, when they really get focused on the buy, they actually shift over and become doing things to and for others. The exact things that we complained about when we were being done to, we flip it. right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that with community. It's like, I think the hardest challenge, I see this with many people from many cultural communities I work with, and I've been doing this for a very long time. Not many folks within many of those communities, and I probably think about that in the US, and it's changed, but it's basically, we don't deserve to be treated fairly. We don't deserve, that's been the battle, right? And I see this within the immigrant community, the refugee community, the immigrant community. Even when many of those folks who are friends of mine get into places where they're providing service, they themselves realize that they're not welcome.
Yep.
See, the welcome part, I think, is the issue. Yeah. Who's welcomed in, and what does that actually mean? And who's doing the welcoming?
Right. Who has the power to welcome?
Yeah, absolutely. Because even last night's conversation, we welcomed child welfare, but they didn't get that it was our agenda. They still didn't get it was our agenda. And we controlled everything, but they still had the power to join or not join. They could dissent at any point in time. But this was not something that we wanted them. Anyways, it's going to be, that's going to be a dissent conversation all the way along, because there'll be places where the community will say no. And child welfare will be angry, and child welfare will have more of a no. Trust me.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this.
Hey guys, beautiful Martin. Thanks for all the investment and time and all your great work. So we'll be in touch soon.
Yes.
And thank you, Maya. Good partner.
Thank you both.
We get rolling. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's do this again.
We will for sure.
I'll be in touch soon, because I would love to set up a call with you and to talk about what we're doing with the collective impact program and everything.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and Jeff, we'll be talking again, Jeff, about the other stuff.
Yes, we will for sure. All right, bud.
Thank you.
Have a good
Take
one.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Great.